This video, we're going to look at area, volume, and surface area. So the first thing we're going to look at are formulas. And there are quite a few formulas in this video. So I would maybe get myself a separate sheet of paper that I could keep track of these formulas and have them all in one place. Maybe even add them with the perimeter formulas. And as you're working through this module, have just a running list of formulas. And that way you can have them to refer back to as you're working. So with these, we've got these area formulas that we're looking at. So the area of a rectangle, so again, we've got width and we've got length. And to find the area of a rectangle, we're just going to simply multiply the length and the width together. So area is length times width. Now remember, a square is just a rectangle with two sides that are the same. And so again, that's just length times width. The sides are just the same. So length and width happen to be the same, which is why it becomes side times side, or side squared. Okay. The next two are going to be a triangle and a parallelogram. So in a triangle, we're going to take 1/2 of the base times the height. Now, it's very important with the triangle that you look at your height and make sure that it is straight up and down. And so you'll see this box, this 90-degree angle box, because you don't want to use one of the sides as a height because you can see they're not straight up and down. It's kind of like when you measure your height, you would measure your height standing straight up. You wouldn't lean over to measure your height. So your height always needs to be standing up straight from the base. So the base and the height are always going to make that 90-degree angle together. And so you get this formula of 1/2 times the base times the height. Then a parallelogram is the same idea. So you're going to have the base and the height that are going to form that 90-degree angle together. But your formula is just base times the height. Okay, the next figure we have is a trapezoid. And with a trapezoid, you've got two bases. So you can see we've got one base that we're going to call B, lowercase b. We've got another base that we're going to call capital B. And then we've got the height. You can see the height is still making a perpendicular line. It's still 90 degrees with the base. And so to find the area of a trapezoid, we're going to find 1/2 times both of our bases. So we're going to add those two together. So base plus base, and then we're going to multiply it by the height. The next figure we're going to look at for area is a circle. So the area of a circle, we're going to take the pi, and we're going to multiply that by the radius squared. And sometimes, remember, we may be asked to leave our answer in terms of pi, so an exact answer. But we also may be asked to approximate it. And so remember, the fraction approximation for pi is 22/7, and the decimal approximation is 3.14. Remember, we're always using the radius to find the area, never the diameter. So let's look at some examples. So here it says find the area of this. Okay, sorry about that. Find the area of this triangle. And so the area formula for a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So I need to make sure I'm picking out the right values to use here. So I need to make sure I'm using the base and I'm using the height. And so the base in this figure and the height are always going to make a 90-degree angle. And so the base, so right here, this 14 yards. The height is going to be this 3 yards. And you can see it's kind of weird because the height's not actually inside the triangle. But we can see that they do make this 90-degree angle together. So the height of this triangle is 3 and the base is 14. So I'm just going to now plug those in. So 1/2 times 14 times 3. Then I would just calculate that in my calculator and I would get 21 yards squared. So with area, you're always going to take your units and square them. Your perimeter, the units were the same, but with area, our units are always going to be squared. Okay. Our next example, we have a circle. And so the area formula for a circle is going to be pi times r squared. So we need to make sure we have the radius. Remember, the radius is only halfway across. So if my diameter is 3, that means my radius is going to be half of that. So half of 3 is 1.5. So my radius is 1.5 feet. Now, it tells me to use 3.14 for pi. That means I want to use an approximation. Okay, so area is equal to 3.14 for pi. Then I'm going to put 1.5 for my radius, and I'm going to square that. So then I would just put that in my calculator, and I would get 7.065. Depending on how it wanted me to round, I could round that. Remember, our units are going to be squared. Example 3. So here we have a trapezoid. So our formula for the trapezoid area, 1/2. Then we've got our two bases that we're going to add together, and we're going to multiply that by the height. So area is equal to 1/2. Now I need to find my two bases. So my bases, I've got a base that's 7, and I've got a base that's 4. So I'm going to add those two together. So I've got 7 plus 4. Then I want to multiply that by my height. And remember, our height needs to be straight up and down 90 degrees from each base. And you can see that 3 is doing just that. So times 3. Now, it doesn't matter which base you say is base 1 and base 2, little b, big B, because we're adding them. And 7 plus 4 and 4 plus 3 is going to give you the same thing. So it doesn't matter which way you do that. From here, we would just work this out, put it in our calculator, or if you wanted to add those together, you could. So could work that out, then we could put that in our calculator, however you wanted to do that, but we would get 16.5. Remember, we're going to square those units. Okay. Our next example is a parallelogram. And so the formula for a parallelogram is base times height. So remember, we've got to find our base and our height. Remember, they're going to be 90 degrees together. Okay, so area, my base is 2 times my height is 4.25. And I'm just going to multiply that out. And that gives me 8.5. I'm going to square my units. The hardest part of these is knowing the formulas. All right, let's look at some that have kind of a combination of shapes. So this is find the area of this figure. So really we have two parts here. So we've got this figure here. Looks like it's kind of maybe like the top of this, I guess you'd say. And then we have this part here. So we've got two different parts here that we're going to need to find the area of. Because we don't have a formula for this weird shape, but we do have the simple basic formulas. So let's start with this one. Okay, so I know it's some sort of parallelogram, okay, and I've got one side is 4, and it tells me this line going down the middle is 4. So I could say that this is a base and this is a height, okay, and it looks like the base is 4, it looks like the height is 4. So I would just find my area, base times height, so 4 times 4, so it looks like that is 16. Remember, our units would be kilometers squared. Okay, so that's part of it. Then we need to do the same thing here. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. This is a rectangle, so length times width. So it looks like I've got 5 times 7, so 35 units, going to be squared. And then to get the entire area, total area, I'm going to add those together. So 16 plus 35 gives me a total of 51 square kilometers. Okay, let's get another one like that. So here, I like this figure better. It's a little easier to see. The other one was tricky. This one, I've got one shape here. Then I've got a second one down here. All right. So if we look at this one, okay, we've got pink one. All right, that's a parallelogram for sure. We've got 4 as our base, then we've got 10 as our height. So that area, 4 times 10, 40 meters squared. Okay, now if I look at this one, it looks like it's a square, but it doesn't really tell me up here. But since this is 4, that means this has to be 4. So yeah, it's definitely a square. So 4 times 4, 16. Then to get my total area, we're just going to add those together. So 16, oh, just meters, plus 40. And so I get 56 meters squared. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is rectangular solids. So everything we've looked at so far have been just flat 2D figures. So now we're going to look at solid figures. So again, if you're keeping track of all your formulas on one page, this would just be another section to add to it. So for a rectangular solid, okay, we're going to look at volume and surface area formulas. So the volume formula that you're going to need to know here is that we're going to take the length times the width times the height. And then we've also got a surface area formula. So the surface area is the area of all the different surfaces. So all of the sides of this figure. Okay. Right, then we've got a cube. Okay, very similar to the rectangular solid, but it's all the sides are squares. So side cubed, and then 6 times side squared. Okay, then we have a sphere. So the volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi times radius cubed. Okay, make sure you know that one. The surface area is 4 pi r squared. For a cylinder, okay, we've got the height, we've got the radius, make sure we're using the radius. So that's volume equals pi times the radius squared times height. And then the surface area is 2 pi rh plus 2 pi r squared. Okay, and then we've got a cone and a pyramid, and these are very similar to each other. So the volume is 1/3 pi r squared h. You've got this surface area formula. We're really focusing on volume, so don't stress yourself out about that formula looking so funky. And then for our pyramid, okay, we've got 1/3 times the side squared times the height. We've also got that surface area formula. Again, please just focus on the volume. So let's look at some examples. So the first one we're going to look at is a basic cube. So the volume of a cube is side cubed. Now you can also just say that this is a rectangular solid. So if we do that, then we could just say it's length times width times height. So that would just mean 10.5 times 10.5 times 10.5, which is the same thing as 10.5 cubed. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys saw that, recognized that, understood that. So then if we put this in our calculator, we get 1,157.625. Now with volume, your units are going to be cubed. So perimeter would just be inches. Area would be inches squared. And volume, inches cubed. Okay, so now let's look at the volume for this cone. So the volume formula for a cone is 1/3 pi r squared times h. So this one tells us to use 3.14 for pi. So I'll start by putting that. So 1/3, 3.14. The radius, so the radius is going to be here on the top. So the radius is always going to be right here, halfway across. So my radius is 2 1/4. Okay, so I'm going to put that in here as 2.25, not 24. I said 5 and I wrote 4. My goodness. 2.25. You're welcome to keep it as a fraction. I just think it's easier to keep it as a decimal. And we're going to square that. So the radius squared. Okay, so this is our radius. Then our height. Our height is going to be straight up and down. It's going to go through the middle of our cone. So our height is 7. So times 7. Then you can put this whole thing in your calculator, all of it at one time. So 1/3 times 3.14 times 2.25 squared times 7. And you get 37.09125. And then depending on how you're asked to round, maybe to the nearest hundredth, units again would be cubed. All right, let's look at this one. This is a sphere. So again, the formula for that would be 4/3 pi r cubed. And it's asking us to use 3.14 for pi, so 4/3 times 3.14. Then I need my radius. Okay, so this one, it gives us the diameter because it goes all the way across, so I need the radius. So the radius would be 2. So I'm going to put 2 cubed. And so that means that my volume, I plug that in my calculator, I would do 4/3 times 3.14 times 2 cubed, and you could put all in one time, 33.49. Again, your units, I want those to be cubed. All right, in this one we have a cylinder. So the volume formula for that is pi r squared h. Still using 3.14 for pi. A radius, again, in this case, they still give us the diameter because it goes all the way across. So I need to make sure that we're using the radius, which is 3. So I'm going to plug in 3 squared. My height, remember the height's going to always go up and down. So times 13. Then again, we can go and plug that straight into our calculator. So 3.14 times 3 squared times 13. And that would give us 122.46 units. Still going to be cubed. Let's look at one more. We'll get a pyramid. And so the formula for a pyramid's volume is 1/3 times side squared times h. And so here, this is my side, and then this is my height, because you can see it makes that 90-degree angle with the bottom. So height is 5, side is 2. So volume equals 1/3 times my side squared times my height. And then we would put that in our calculator. And I got 6.67 centimeters cubed.